perfect score in terms of credit agencies because we have managed to keep our debt as a size of our GDP under control. We were
The Prime Minister knows that the House is not sitting normally. This is a committee of the whole. It's not the normal way that the House of Commons does its business, and the Prime Minister should acknowledge that. Mr. Speaker, I've raised the issue of Brant Tractor in my riding numerous times with the Prime Minister, and I'd like to do so again today because as Conservatives have been asking for weeks for the Liberals to amend the wage subsidy to allow companies that have acquired another company to compare their revenues based on the combined revenues of those two previous companies. Last week, the government announced a change to eligibility to the wage subsidy for companies formed by an amalgamation, but not for acquisitions. There are many employees whose jobs depend on the answer to this question, Mr. Speaker. Can the Prime Minister confirm whether these same rules will be extended to acquisitions?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in response to the honourable member's first comment, these are not normal times. We are in a pandemic situation where Canadians are having to adjust many different ways. And at the same time, it is important that we keep our parliamentary institutions going, that we provide opportunities for MPs to ask questions on behalf of their constituents of the government. And that's why we have had 3 sittings a week over the past number of weeks. In regards to the business in the member opposite's riding, I can highlight that finance officials have been in touch with that company, and we continue to look at ways of closing further gaps. Even as we've helped millions of Canadians and hundreds of thousands of companies, there is more to do, and we will keep working on that.
Mr. Scheer.
Mr. Speaker, in March of 2019, the rating agency Fitch issued a warning about Canada's overall government debt level. They said that Canada's gross general government debt remains close to a level that is, quote, incompatible with AAA status. Now, we all know what that means. If our credit is downgraded, that will mean that taxpayers will pay more to service the cost of that debt. Can the Prime Minister tell the House how much it will cost Canadians in additional debt servicing charges if Canada's credit rating is downgraded?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there are only 2 G7 countries that have unanimous AAA credit ratings for their economic and fiscal management going into this crisis. That is Germany and Canada. We have a perfect score in terms of credit agencies because we have managed to keep our debt as a size of our GDP under control. We were responsible over the past 5 years, which means that when this pandemic has hit us, we have had the means to invest to help directly millions upon millions of Canadians who needed that help.
Mr. Scheer.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, the exact opposite is true. Remember, when this government was first elected, they promised that the deficits would be small and temporary, just $10 billion a year for 4 years. Then they had to throw away that metric, and they said, well, as long as our debt to GDP ratio remains constant, that would be okay. Well, we all know that the economic output has shrunk. Meanwhile, the spending, even before this pandemic, was going through the roof. Remember, it was this government that said Loblaws deserved $12 million for new fridges, and MasterCard, a credit card company, deserved $50 million in corporate bailouts. This government made Canada weak heading into this pandemic, and all this additional spending that is being borrowed to provide assistance to Canadians is coming on the heels of record deficits and is hurting Canada's ability to maintain its credit rating. Now, one of the ways that you can protect your credit rating is if you show the people you owe the money to how you're going to pay it back. So is the government willing to provide Canadians with an update as to how they will get Canada's fiscal track back under control when this pandemic is over?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it's deja vu all over again. We've heard yet again the same economic arguments that the Conservatives have been making for years. They made them in the 2015 election where we proposed to invest in Canadians, and they talked about debt reduction and austerity. They lost that election. Then in 2019, after 4 years of demonstrating that investing in Canadians not only could create over 1 million new jobs, but lift over 1 million Canadians out of poverty, they continued to make those same tired arguments and were rejected once again by Canadians. We have demonstrated that fiscal responsibility, that managing our finances properly while investing in Canadians has been the responsible thing to do and left us the fiscal firepower to invest in Canadians during this pandemic.
That's right.
You are entering prophetic minds.
Communism is not one of principle or theory, it is a difference of method. The socialists pursue their aims by constitutional method. And it is their right, and sincerely but vainly hope, to preserve individual liberty. They are our fellow countrymen, however misguided.